When people hear the phrase Social Security for all, it immediately sounds like an expansion of the current Social Security system. But that's not what is being proposed. Social Security is an earned program. Americans work, pay payroll taxes, and later receive retirement or disability benefits tied to their work history. It's based on decades of contributions. A universal basic income, however, is entirely different. UBI is a flat cash payment to every adult, regardless of whether they worked, contributed, or already earn a high salary. In contrast, a guaranteed basic income, GBI, provides similar payments but only to certain groups, usually low-income households, parents, or city residents. These are important distinctions that help us separate earned benefits from universal entitlements. The confusion comes when advocates brand a universal income plan as Social Security for all. It creates the impression that it's linked to the Social Security Trust Fund, when in fact it isn't. Social Security is already projected to face depletion around 2033 to 2034, meaning benefits would need to be reduced unless Congress acts. Attaching a massive new entitlement to that name risks damaging public trust in a program millions of seniors rely on. For clarity, proposals should be called what they are, either UBI or GBI, instead of borrowing the Social Security label. While a full national UBI has never been implemented in the U.S., there are several real-world GBI experiments that offer evidence about its effects. One of the earliest was the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, SEED, launched in 2019. It gave 125 randomly selected residents $500 per month for 2 years, with no conditions attached. Independent researchers found striking outcomes. Income volatility dropped, mental health improved significantly, and participants were actually more likely to move into full-time jobs compared to those who didn't receive payments. Similar pilots in other cities, such as Jackson, Mississippi, and Chicago, have shown comparable benefits. These findings matter because they show that direct, unconditional cash support can stabilize households and even encourage workforce participation, not discourage it as critics often claim. However, it's important to note that all these trials were small-scale, targeted, and locally funded. They were not universal, and they didn't attempt to provide payments to millions of residents at once. That's a critical difference. What works effectively for a few hundred or a few thousand families may not scale smoothly to the national level. The appeal of $1,000 for everyone is obvious. It would be life-changing for many families living paycheck to paycheck. But the cost is staggering, with a U.S. population of about 340 million people and approximately 268 million adults. Providing $1,000 a month to each adult would cost over $3.2 trillion per year. If the payments included children as well, the cost would climb closer to $4.1 trillion annually. To put that in context, the entire federal budget for 2024 was about $6.3 trillion, meaning this one program alone would consume roughly half of all federal spending. This scale raises difficult questions. How would the government fund it? Options might include massive new taxes, such as a national value-added tax, VAT, steep increases in income or wealth taxes, or cuts to existing programs. Without clear financing, a nationwide UBI risks being fiscally unsustainable. It's one thing to support $500 monthly payments for 125 families in Stockton, and another to guarantee $1,000 monthly for over 260 million adults across the country. The math forces us to ask whether universal coverage is realistic or whether targeted aid makes more sense. One of the more concrete attempts at this idea was the Support Act introduced in Congress. It proposed giving $1,200 per adult per month and $600 per child, structured as a guaranteed income tax credit. Unlike pure UBI, it had income thresholds, meaning wealthier families would eventually phase out of eligibility. Even with those limits, the cost would still have been in the trillions, making it difficult to gain traction. Not surprisingly, the bill never advanced. The Support Act illustrates an important point. While policymakers occasionally introduce ambitious guaranteed income bills, they rarely gain enough bipartisan support to pass. The cost, design, and political optics of sending checks to everyone, including the wealthy, create barriers that make national adoption unlikely. Instead, these bills tend to serve as conversation starters about poverty reduction, inequality, and automation, rather than as serious, immediately actionable legislation. In November 2024, voters in Oregon got the chance to directly weigh in on a UBI-style policy. Measure 118 would have increased corporate minimum taxes and redistributed the revenue as a $1,600 annual rebate to residents. The proposal was not nearly as bold as $1,000 per month, but it was still framed as a universal payment. The result? Nearly 80% of voters rejected it. That overwhelming defeat sent a strong signal about the challenges of passing universal cash programs through popular vote. The Oregon case suggests that while targeted pilots may find support and generate positive headlines, universal proposals with broad funding mechanisms face much stronger resistance. People are often skeptical about how such programs will be paid for and whether they are fair. Oregon voters may have liked the idea of extra money, but they balked at the trade-off of higher taxes and redistribution on a statewide scale. This is an important reality check for advocates of national UBI. To finance a $3 to $4 trillion annual program, policymakers would need major new revenue sources. Some proposals point to a national VAT, similar to systems in Europe, which would tax consumption rather than income. Others consider carbon taxes, wealth taxes, or significant increases in income and payroll taxes. Another option often floated is cutting or consolidating existing welfare programs to offset the cost, though this raises concerns about whether vulnerable groups would actually come out ahead. The reality is that each funding method comes with trade-offs. A VAT would be regressive unless paired with offsets for low-income households. Wealth taxes are politically difficult and legally uncertain in the U.S. Raising income taxes could slow growth and face strong resistance. Cutting existing programs risks undermining benefits for the very people a guaranteed income is meant to help. Without a clear and balanced funding plan, the concept of universal checks remains more aspirational than practical. Perhaps the most controversial part of this proposal is the name, Social Security for All. Social Security is one of the most trusted and widely recognized federal programs in America. It represents an earned benefit built on decades of work and contributions. Using that label for a universal cash program risks blurring the lines and creating confusion. Millions of seniors and people with disabilities rely on Social Security, and many may feel that attaching its name to an unrelated program is misleading or even offensive. More importantly, Social Security itself faces a looming financial challenge. The Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is projected to be depleted around 2033 to 2034. At that point, unless Congress acts, benefits would be cut by about 20 to 25%. That's the real Social Security crisis lawmakers need to solve. Mixing in debates about universal cash programs under the same name risks distracting from urgent reforms needed to secure the programs seniors already depend on. One alternative to UBI that economists have proposed for decades is the negative income tax, NIT. The concept is simple. Households below a certain income threshold receive cash payments from the government, while those above the threshold continue paying taxes. This creates a guaranteed income floor without sending checks to the wealthy. For example, If the median household income is about $83,000 and a family earns only $63,000, they might receive $20,000 annually to bring them closer to the median. The NIT approach addresses some of the biggest criticisms of UBI. It keeps costs lower by targeting support where it's most needed, while still guaranteeing that no one falls below a basic living standard. It also integrates payments into the tax system, making it easier to administer and less likely to overlap awkwardly with existing programs. While not as flashy as $1,000 for everyone, it offers a more practical balance between affordability and fairness. Critics often argue that guaranteed income would discourage work, yet evidence from pilot programs suggests otherwise. In Stockton and other cities, participants didn't quit their jobs. Instead, many used the stability to pursue better employment opportunities. The payments reduced financial stress, improved mental health, and helped households cover emergencies without spiraling into debt. Rather than creating dependency, small-scale GBIS actually encouraged upward mobility. But at the national level, things get more complex. Would the payments count as income for programs like SNAP, Medicaid, or SSI? If they do, low-income families could lose access to benefits, leaving them no better off. If they don't, the federal price tag would balloon even higher. There's also the question of inflation. While most economists don't believe UBI would automatically trigger runaway inflation, injecting trillions of dollars into the economy without careful design could push up prices in sectors like housing. These concerns highlight why scaling from pilot to national program is not straightforward. One of the strongest arguments for UBI is the rise of automation and artificial intelligence. As machines and algorithms take over more tasks, some worry that millions of jobs could be lost or reshaped, leaving workers in need of a stable income floor. Advocates frame UBI as a kind of automation dividend, sharing the economic gains of new technology broadly, rather than letting them concentrate at the top. This argument resonates with many people, especially younger generations who are watching automation transform industries from trucking to retail to customer service. However, it remains speculative. We don't yet know how fast AI will change the job market or whether new industries will emerge to absorb displaced workers. Designing permanent trillion-dollar programs based on uncertain predictions is risky. Still, the automation debate ensures that UBI will remain part of the conversation in years to come. Looking at the political landscape, the chances of a full UBI passing Congress anytime soon are slim. The Support Act stalled, and Oregon voters overwhelmingly rejected even a modest UBI-style rebate. That suggests the public is cautious about universal checks when trade-offs are clearly presented. What's more likely in the near future is continued expansion of city-level GBI pilots, targeted federal tax credits, or smaller guaranteed income programs aimed at vulnerable populations. These targeted measures face fewer political hurdles, cost far less, and can still deliver meaningful results. For example, expanding the child tax credit or earned income tax credit functions as a kind of guaranteed income without the massive price tag of UBI. While these programs don't have the simplicity or universality of $1,000 for all, they represent a realistic path forward in today's divided Congress. At the end of the day, the biggest issue isn't whether guaranteed income is a good idea. The real issue is branding it as Social Security. Social Security is an earned benefit program funded by payroll taxes and trusted by millions of seniors and workers. It's facing a real solvency challenge that must be fixed in the next decade. Mixing it with debates about UBI risks undermining trust and distracting from urgent reforms. If the nation wants to experiment with UBI or GBI, let's call it what it is, a national income floor, guaranteed income credit, or negative income tax. Keeping these programs separate respects the integrity of Social Security and avoids confusion. So the question I'll leave with you is this. Would you support a universal $1,000 monthly payment for every adult in America? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments and let's see where our community stands.